I'm going to read to you part of the first chapter of my book, Gloves Off 40 Years of Unfiltered Sports Writing. This chapter tells how I broke the news in 2006 that Bill Walsh was dying of leukemia. Here goes. I was driving to the Sonoma Coast with my wife, taking a few days off from my job writing sports columns for the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat, and had rented a house on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, needing the peace of the breaking waves and the salt, sweet air. My phone rang somewhere past the town of Jenner on the narrow, winding Pacific Coast Highway. Lowell, it's Bill Walsh. He was nervous, definitely nervous. Words getting out about my illness, he said. He sighed a deep life sigh. People are beginning to call me. I want you and Ira Miller to break the news. Because he was an old-time coach, he was faithful to the older writers who'd put in their time, a pro seeking out pros, and he trusted us to do it right. That's what I think. It's what I'd like to think. But I couldn't talk then. A moment like this arrives, a dying man calling me, and I'm temporarily in limbo. I said, embarrassed, Bill, I'm driving to Sea Ranch. I can't do this now. I still have a ways to go, and Ira is in L.A. I couldn't believe I was saying this to a man facing the ultimate. Can you set it up for tomorrow morning, he said, frustrated, needing to get it over with. Next morning, we had a three-way phone conversation, call it a conference call about Bill's disease. He asked us to write he had leukemia. Please write it, he said. About small things, Bill could be petty. This was known. And he could be a whiner. This was also known, but now he was brave and forceful, and I was getting a lesson in the proper way to conduct myself in the inevitable crisis, the proper way to prepare for, well, God knows what. We talked 45 minutes, Bill, Ira, and I, Bill going over the details with the same care he took in creating his game plans. He told us 2 years earlier doctors discovered he was anemic. When they tested the bone marrow, they found I was deficient, he said. But it was way more than anemia. He'd recently had a series of transfusions and said he was feeling better. I'm positive, but not evangelistic, he told us. I'm pragmatically doing everything my physicians recommend, and I'm working my way through it. Walsh already had let former players know. News to us. He said about 100 had called. He had recently had breakfast with Joe Montana, the most famous player Walsh ever drafted and developed. Walsh had talked several times on the phone with Steve Young, another 49ers Hall of Fame quarterback, and they were trying to set up a meeting. Jerry Rice, Keena Turner, and Ronnie Lott had been especially helpful. Former 49ers owner Eddie DeBartolo Jr. recently flew from his home in Florida to visit Walsh. There had been trouble between the two men, especially after DeBartolo stripped Walsh of his title as 49ers president, but they had made up years ago. In the previous summer, Walsh had attended a lavish party in Las Vegas DeBartolo threw for former 49ers players and coaches. News about me has been circulating, Walsh told us. It's been getting back to me. There are too many people following the progress of this. I felt it was appropriate to confirm what's happening. Walsh was quiet a while. We could hear him breathing hard over the phone. I'm running out of energy, he admitted, his voice stripped of life. Did you get what you need? We said we did. After Bill hung up, Ira and I, writing for different publications, went over the basic facts with each other. Then we made a pact. We would file our stories at exactly the same moment. We checked our watches. Forget about who got credit for breaking the story. Who cared who got credit? I sent the story to my paper and phoned my editor, who said, "You're on vacation. Why are you calling?" I told him Bill Walsh had leukemia and I had just sent him the story breaking the news. No shit. He was awestruck. This was Bill Walsh and our paper had the story. He said he'd read the story and phone me right back. Called back in 2 minutes. Holy shit, he said. He thanked me and said I handled it right. I was a columnist and rarely wrote news stories, and then he said he'd send the story to the Associated Press for national dissemination. This was a big deal, and AP needed it, he said. 20 minutes later, it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes, my wife and I were eating lunch, ham and cheese sandwiches, and Knorr cream of leek soup, something I never eat except at the chilly, windy Sonoma coast, where it makes me feel warm and secure. My wife turned on the TV to CNN, or it could have been ESPN. An announcer said, "This bulletin just in. Bill Walsh revealed he has leukemia." The announcer told a few more details. My wife, who is not a journalist, stared at me, eyes wide. How in the world did that story go from this kitchen on this deserted coast to TV so fast? How did that happen? I told her that was modern media. News travels at the speed of light, even from here, with just us, the sea lions, and a few foxes. I could see she was impressed. I put on a warm jacket and walked south along the cliff, overlooking the moving, agitated sea, the water the only sound except for seabirds. I walked past a Monterey cypress giving me shade, walked with my head down. Not long ago, I remembered Bill and I had talked on the phone. When I got ready to hang up, he said, "I've enjoyed our intellectual conversations," meaning they would end soon. "Screw intellectual, Bill," I said. "I like you." Rest in peace, Bill Walsh.